Today, we're joined by Sean Regan. Sean was the global head of product marketing at Atlassian, where he spent 8 years building go-to-market momentum for the company's products, hyperscaling the company from less than 1,000 employees to over 12,000. Prior to Atlassian, he had experience working at startups and large tech companies, including Logic, Symantec, and Veritas. Sean is also an entrepreneur and is now embarking on a new chapter in the AI world. Sean, we're super excited to have you here on our podcast. Where are you dialing in from today?
Hey, super excited to be here. I'm dialing in today from Fort Mason in San Francisco, but I live up in Olympic Valley, California, near Lake Tahoe.
Awesome. Well, let's get started. So first question, on top of the introduction that I gave, we heard that it was Dr. Dre and Metallica that got your career started. So traveling back in time, can you just tell us more about that story?
Yeah. I guess I owe Lars Ulrich a thank you from Metallica. How I ended up there was I had a computer science focus in my undergrad, and I really just didn't love it. It wasn't the most exciting work that I felt like I could be doing, but I wanted tech experience. And so I dropped my computer science minor and I walked into the IT department at my college and just said, hey, I want some tech experience. I'll volunteer. I'll do whatever, but I want that experience. And this was probably around 1998. So tech was getting pretty exciting and fresh at that time. And so I got a job in the college IT department. And at that time, all of the students were using all of the bandwidth at the university to download music onto Napster and to use AOL Instant Messenger and all these sort of new technologies that were coming out. And through my kind of experience with the university, I also had access to one of the faster internet connections around. And so I had more songs in my Napster than most people anywhere. And that was fun. If we were having a party, I had all the songs. But one day a letter showed up in the mail from the lawyers representing Dr. Dre and Metallica, noting that I had a large Napster instance and that I immediately needed to cease and desist. And I wasn't sure what to make of that, so I brought it over to my criminal justice professor and said, what do I do? He gave me some advice, and we were able to navigate that situation nice and easy. But that experience sort of balancing what the users and the students wanted to do, while also being on the organization side for the IT department, really opened the door for my first job at Logic in that startup. And so I'm sort of thankful for that experience.
Awesome. I guess there's always a silver lining to even getting sued. Also, I guess, is there anything, looking back, you wish you had known then that you know now?
So much. Maybe one thing, I think, just to all the students and people starting their career that listen to your podcast. I graduated in 2002, right? We started our senior year with 9/11. The economy was in a tough spot. Nobody was hiring. All the signing bonuses and froth of previous 3 or 4 years had stopped. And so it really felt like a terrible time to enter the job market. And as I look back, there's just small things that I did because I was interested in technology that over time start to ladder up to experience, even if it's not with an employer. And so I was able to have much more interesting job interviews, deeper conversations with people because I was also interested in what it was I wanted to work on. And so if you're interested in joining a tech company, just keep surrounding yourself, building the experience, do whatever you can to just steep yourself in that space. And over time, it starts to add up and become more valuable. And by the time you're in your career for 10 or 20 years, that experience just ladders and ladders and ladders and propels you. And so even small steps right now are powerful over the long span of your career.
Got it. Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. And also it's very helpful advice for us students in the audience because we're also going through a troublesome labor market right now. So thank you for that. So now I want to move to Atlassian, the company. Obviously, we love Atlassian. I think Cynthia and I both use this product, Jira, and I think our club uses Trello. But I guess just for the audience, someone who might not be as familiar with the company, can you just do a quick intro about Atlassian?
Yeah, there's probably no such thing as a quick intro to Atlassian. It's an incredibly unique company, so I'll touch on just a couple of bits. First off, started in Australia in 2002. 2 guys in Australia graduated at the same time I did and started an IT consulting company because they didn't want to wear suits and work in a bank. And what they realized was, as they were doing IT consulting, there needed to be a way to track work and manage work across the 2 founders. And so they created Jira. And then a year or 2 later, they created Confluence, which was a wiki. And what really took off at that time was this way of building software called Agile. And so these things sort of combined together and really helped create what is one of the most successful and, I think, incredible stories of tech in the last 20 years. Atlassian's grown to almost 12,000 people. They're close to doing $1 billion in revenue a quarter. And it's just been a remarkable company that has really changed the way everyone works in at least technology and often far beyond tech companies.
Yeah, I think that's something that all of us who've worked in tech definitely resonate with. But I guess when you joined the company, it wasn't as successful as it is today. Why did you decide to join Atlassian?
Well, I learned an expensive lesson too. I'd say in maybe about 2015 or so, Atlassian's recruiter reached out to me. And I didn't know much about Atlassian at the time. And I listened to the pitch and I said, no, I'm not really interested in that. That sounds weird. Weird because they were going to start an IT business that sold to IT without salespeople. And I thought, I don't know if that's going to work. In hindsight, I really should have joined the company then. Maybe that's 2012. And I actually joined in 2015. So I guess it was a few years earlier. But the reason I joined is if I think back to that first startup that I landed in after college, we didn't have the term product-led growth back then. But what I figured out in that role was a way to reach and communicate with our customers at scale without doing cold calls and traditional sales and marketing. And that was really powerful in that startup environment. But then I was acquired into a very large sales-driven company in Veritas, which merged with Symantec. So if you can imagine, that's about 12,000, I think, sales reps at that company, 8,000, 10,000 sales reps maybe. And so it was a very sales-oriented culture and way of selling. And I'd always had in the back of my mind what I was able to do at the startup and how software as a service was changing the way software was built and sold. And so I looked out and I said, what companies are out there pioneering a self-distributing model of software where the product sells itself through virality and network effects? And in 2015, the two companies that I had come up with that I felt really reflected this well and were great opportunities were HipChat and Slack. I, at the time, was working on starting a company myself, but I also looked at Slack and HipChat and reached out and sort of kept in touch with different people at those companies and ultimately joined HipChat right after it was acquired by Atlassian. And in simple terms, I want to start and run a software company at some point in my career. Atlassian builds software. So what better place to learn about how to build software than the place that builds products to build software? And I wanted to be surrounded by young people who had the optionality to go and do their own thing someday. Atlassian felt like a very promising company where the alumni of the company would be in a position to go out and take some risks with their career. And so building software and being around a group of people who post Atlassian wanted to go out and start and build something were two of the big reasons.
Got it. So it was both a focus on PLG and also the culture that really draw you to the company.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then I guess you held different roles at the company. Can you walk us through some of the roles that you had?
Yeah. So when I joined, my job was to lead marketing for HipChat. And that was a super exciting moment in time because Slack and HipChat were really taking off as basically the fastest apps that anybody had ever seen. I started in that role and then very quickly was asked to move over and also lead marketing for Jira, which was the franchise for Atlassian. And that was a really exciting moment because we were moving from a server-based product to a cloud-based version of Jira, which is no doubt what you've probably used. And over time, I eventually just led all of the product marketing for the Atlassian products. So we have products for developers, for knowledge workers, business teams, IT teams, and really was just privileged to be in that position at Atlassian.
Sounds like your role sort of expanded along with when the company was hyper scaling. What was it like 10xing Atlassian over the 8 years?
It's wild. It's wild.
I bet
all
it is.
Jobs are wild, I've realized. Every company has their phrasiness and the things that they have really figured out. And I'd say there's a saying, I can't remember who to credit this to, but there's a saying that says, go find a rocket ship and try to get a seat on it and then hold on. And I think it speaks to a couple of things for people earlier in their career. Really take a look at companies that are in a market that you feel optimistic about, that market's going to get bigger. And companies that are growing and have strong products. And if you can find that market where that opportunity exists, then hang on because it's going to grow fast. And that's really why I chose tech is I love that opportunity that comes with hyperscaling. And it's hard. I could tell you, go find a company that's hyperscaling. It'll be great. But at the same time, imagine riding a car without a windshield. You're just getting hit by wind and bugs and road debris, right, as you're going 100 miles an hour. And I think hyperscaling a company feels like that. 1 minute, you're working on a marketing campaign. So in the Atlassian context, we hired Lumberg from Office Space. We did a big marketing campaign. Everybody was excited. Millions of dollars and billboards and everything. And the next minute, I was in incident management and doing incident management work for a product that was having reliability issues. You could make the argument that being in a hyperscaling company is discovering a new job every couple of days. Now, at 12,000 employees, we have people that do incident management. We have people that do brand and PR. And so maybe the key thing for people early in their career is a smaller company, you're going to be doing all sorts of jobs. And in a big company, it tends to be more specialized. And being in a hyperscaling one means you do both.
So you have to learn both to be, in that all hands on deck situation, but also as the company grows, learn how to divide up the work and conquer.
Yeah, divide the work. And I think it's a great opportunity to figure out what you love and what you think you can be world-class in because you love it. Mm-hmm. And then as the company grows, focus on that and let the other parts of the job that you're less interested in go out to other departments and other focus areas. So it's a really luxury situation, I'd say, to be in a hyperscaling company because the growth is everywhere and the opportunity is probably more than you have the time to even pursue.
Yeah, and it sounds like a valuable experience that one could ever ask for. So going back, I guess, to being visionary, the part that you've touched on, if you look into the future for Atlassian, can we get your thoughts on sort of the future strategies where Atlassian's heading next?
Absolutely. So if you think about the very heart of Atlassian, it's collaboration. And collaboration in the early stages for Atlassian was with software developers. They helped large groups of software developers work together and ship product. The best way I could describe that to someone who maybe isn't a software developer is it's like writing a book with 10 authors and each one of them is working on a different chapter. And somehow all those chapters have to come together and make sense when you put it on the bookshelf. And so there's a very special type of collaboration that software developers have learned and Atlassian's helped foster that we think is actually useful and relevant for everybody who works with a computer and works as part of a team. And so Atlassian's strategy really, there's three parts of that strategy that they're focused on. The first is the core business around software developers. The second is around transforming the way IT is done, so information technology. And then the third is how do they transform the way people that are knowledge workers? And that's just code for people that work in an office with a computer as part of a team. But how can we bring those arts of collaboration that developers have figured out to business users? And that's really where Atlassian, I think, is going to focus quite a bit in the future.
I'm glad you mentioned that because recently we saw the Loom acquisition in the news. And I guess Loom, it's not IT or DevOps focused. So that's sort of expanding into the office collaboration grander scheme. So any comments on that acquisition and how that would play into the strategy and the vision?
Yeah, I loved seeing that acquisition go through for a couple of reasons. I think one, as a user, and then two, as a person in technology, and three, as a former Atlassian and still a shareholder in the company. First off, as a user, if you work in a globally distributed company, or you work even with people in a different building or office, there's this collaboration challenge of how do you really communicate what's going on in high context and high detail? And the example that I really struggled with early in Atlassian was half of our company's in Australia. I would shut down my computer at the end of the day. I'd eat dinner, I'd go home, I'd go to sleep, and I'd wake up. And it was like I fell asleep in a movie, right? I walk into the office and I go, wait, what happened? How did this change? Who did what? And you have this sort of gap because the Australians are working while you sleep and vice versa. One of the ways that we started using Loom internally for teams that span time zones was at the end of your day, you would very quickly just turn on the Loom video recording. And maybe you'd have slides or a document or whatever it is that you were working on that day. And you'd say, hey, Cynthia, hey, Sophie, we came to a couple of decisions today. I wanted to explain them to you in more detail than I could just type up. So here you go. We did this. Here's why. It changes these things. I just wanted you to know that when you start your day so that you don't do the wrong kind of work. And so what would happen is I would send that video over to Australia at the end of my day. And then in the morning, I'd come into the office and there'd be a Loom waiting for me from someone on the team that says, hey, Sean, got your message. You're right. Last night, while you guys were sleeping, we did these 6 things. And you may want to check out this link and so forth. And that was one way that we used it. The other ways we used it was feedback on recordings or videos or documents where we would put them into the Loom frame. So it seems like a simple technology, and you might argue that it is. But when you're working collaboratively, especially across time zones, teams, and buildings, it's a game changer. So I love that as a user. As a person in tech, I loved it because right now, with the markets being in such turmoil, everybody's standing still. And it's the same in real estate, right? The sellers want to hold on to their price and the buyers want to see a lower price. And so nobody's doing anything. That's a tough situation. And so I applaud Atlassian for the boldness to go out and set a price and say, here's what we're willing to pay. And I applaud Loom for looking at that and saying, you know what, we're going to meet at a price that's good for both of us. And I think that's going to unlock some more opportunity in the market broadly. And then lastly, as a shareholder, Atlassian has millions of monthly active users. The product-led distribution that Atlassian can bring to Loom is going to be transformative. I know you mentioned the Wharton team uses Trello. Imagine if you had just a button in Trello where you could record a Loom and immediately add context to a card on Trello. And I'm sure Atlassian is going to look into all sorts of great distribution, pricing, and packaging to make that happen. So Loom's ability to reach the market just got a lot of zeros added to it in terms of users.
Awesome. Thanks for that. And I'm also very excited for the potential of Atlassian plus Loom and all of the new use cases that would unlock. Switching gears a little bit, we want to move on to covering your new journey post Atlassian. You wrapped up 8 years at Atlassian really recently. First off, how did you decide that now is the right time to jump into your next adventure?
A couple of things. The excitement right now that I have for what's going on in the market is higher than it's been in quite a long time. Yes, the financial markets are in turmoil, but what is possible and what's out there to do today to start a company is incredible. Software as a service has made it easier to spin up a company and get the infrastructure built. 20 years ago, you wrote your first check from your venture capital investors was all spent on building infrastructure before you could even start to build your app. Today, you could start instantly. If you watched OpenAI's Dev Day yesterday, the amount of new capabilities they released for builders to go and do new things is insane. I can't even keep up with it. I just saw so much opportunity out there that it felt like the time. And my co-founder, Dan, who I'm working with, built the first online travel reservation company in the 90s. And he says, Sean, it's just like then right now. There is so much opportunity because of these new technologies that you just have to get in the game. Even if you're just building something for yourself as a student, that learning that you can undertake here puts you ahead of most people. Really, the AI sort of breakthrough that happened in November of last year with OpenAI has got me super excited.
Yeah, and I think especially with some of the new releases from OpenAI, it's very clear that there's going to be an ecosystem of opportunities around this breakthrough of AI. Can you tell us a little bit about what's next for you on this horizon? It sounds like you're starting to work on an AI startup. Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, absolutely. So we've built a prototype. So we have a development team that's working hard on the early version of the product. And there's a couple things that we see out there. We really feel like there's an opportunity for a more collaborative AI experience. One where you can engage your coworkers as well as the apps and potentially even the other AIs that you use in your company. We just don't imagine that that's going to be a single player experience in the future. Second, if you really think about AI, it's transformative in the way that you engage with computers. It's more of a natural language experience. You could imagine, I wrote a children's book last week using DALL-E and OpenAI with prompts from my 4-year-old and my 6-year-old. And in 2 hours, we had written a children's book, created all the images, I sent it off, had it printed, and it was delivered to my house last week. So that ability to interact with the computer is changing, and we are going to take a direct approach for bringing a more collaborative experience to AI. And I think maybe one of the reasons why that's so interesting to me is I feel like there's a lot of innovation theater today in AI, where companies are just slapping AI on everything and saying, hey, check us out. And if you really think deeply and you're evaluating the market, you say, okay, that's okay maybe for this year, but how does that look in 3 years or 5 years or 10 years? One of the key theories that we have is what I'm calling sidecar AI is not the right approach, meaning each app vendor today, maybe it's GitHub, Atlassian, Notion, Figma, Canva, Adobe, they're all adding AI to their products. And that means for customers like you, you're paying for AI potentially in 5 or 6 or 7 different tools. And those AI tools aren't that smart because they're constrained to the single application they're in. We think there's an opportunity to really bridge that and deliver something more powerful.
Awesome. Yeah, that sounds really exciting. And I think there's a lot more that AI can unlock. And the more entrepreneurs think deeply about AI, the more value that can be added in the real use cases. So I think taking a step back broadly, AI is disrupting the industry, as we all know. For students like us, or just for anyone who don't really have prior experience in the industry, how can anyone think about and participate in the opportunities of AI?
I think one of the things that is probably most powerful right now is that AI is democratizing access to some of the technology that you previously had to have a computer science degree to use. So you can sign up for ChatGPT or Bard or Claude, and you can go and ask it, how do I build for this API? How do I automate this system? How do I even take the example of Jira? If you wanted to run a search in Jira for all the issues assigned to you with a certain status and a certain integration, you'd have to write something called JQL, or Jira Query Language. Not too different from the idea of SQL for writing queries to databases. AI today actually makes it possible for you to undertake those things in natural language. And so there's a huge democratization. Anyone can sign up for these tools and start to test them. So if you want to work in tech and you're not currently spending, let's say, 30 minutes a week experimenting for how these tools can help you in your current career or in your job search, you're putting yourself at a disadvantage, because I feel like I am 5 to 10x more powerful as a product marketing leader with AI attached to my browser and attached to my daily workflow than I would be without it. So sign up. And even simple things. I was advising a college student the other day who wanted some help on his cover letter. I produced a cover letter for him almost immediately with ChatGPT, and we worked together to refine it and sort of tailor it for a job that he wanted. That individual wanted to work in tech, but he had never really used ChatGPT at all. I think you have to just put some time into it as a hobby, because it'll improve, I think, your abilities as a marketer or product manager or whatever it is you decide to do.
Yeah, that makes sense. And familiarity with the tools also helps you understand the landscape and where the opportunities are as you're exploring ChatGPT versus Bard versus Llama, for example. I guess in this final section, we'd love to just get your thoughts on career advice. So many of our listeners are students and folks who are early in their careers. And earlier on in this episode, you were talking about really trying to join a rocket ship and identifying hyperscaling companies and being a part of that journey. I'm curious, are there signs that we should be looking for to identify what is a rocket ship, and how do we pick the right market and the right company to be a part of that journey?
Yeah, that's the magic, right? I keep a little spreadsheet of all the companies I've ever spoken to or I've heard from a recruiter, and I try to assess my own decision making. And the reality is it's tough to pick perfectly. And sometimes, you're going to make mistakes. But I think at this point in your career, getting in and getting experience is going to be important and help set you up to make sure not only can you choose the best company in the future, but you're well qualified for that company when the opportunity arises. So get in the game, build some experience. But things you can do, one of the maybe tricks that folks can look at in the job hunting process would be set up Google Alerts or use Crunchbase or some other products to go and understand which companies have recently raised money. Because if you think about it, a company that has raised money has A, proven to investors that they have something worth investing in, and B, now has usually several $1 million extra by which they invest and grow the company. And you can imagine that after a company raises money, job postings follow. You want to be able to track, if you're looking at startups, track those companies so that you can get in there and apply when those job postings hit up. But I'd also encourage you, don't wait for something to show up on the careers page. In fact, I'm not sure I've ever gotten a job from filing on the careers page. It's always come from, I've shown up, and just like you did with this podcast, in someone's inbox or on their LinkedIn, or I've asked somebody for an introduction. And I think a lot of people might be in the audience saying, I don't feel comfortable doing that. What if I get rejected? What if it's creepy? It isn't. It shows that you have the gumption and the forward pressure to move something forward. And if you're not willing to step in and move your own career forward, are you really going to be effective at a company doing it for them? And so be bold would be, I guess, my summary for that.
Yeah, that's such a good advice. I think it's kind of like creating the opportunity that you want and really being kind of owning your own career path. And for founders in the audience, do you have any advice for how to succeed? What would be your 1 or 2 tips for an entrepreneur who's just starting their journey?
Yeah, maybe the first thing I would say is just keep building your community. Whatever it is that you're going to build for. And my guess is that for an early stage founder, it's going to be about something they're passionate about, maybe personally or in terms of their education or their hobbies. You can build in the open with that community. So let's say you're building a developer tool. You should be on Hacker News. You should have a GitHub repository that you share. You might want to blog. You might be looking at Product Hunt. You might have Reddit. But build that community so that when you come out with something, you have a large group of people with similar interests that you can feed back from. You can ask them questions. You can show them your prototypes. And I think maybe what shifted in the 20 years of my career is that when I started, it was harder, I think, to build the product than it was to get the audience. You'd have to go out and do all this work to go and build the product, and then you could go and get the audience. I think it's switched. I think today it's actually become easier to create product and harder to get distribution and awareness because everybody's out there competing for an audience. So build that community is my first piece of advice. Maybe my second one would be listen really deeply. There's always a question behind the question. It's like someone's asking you a question or they're asking about your product. Try to really figure out what their motivation is and what the polite question is that they're not actually asking you. It gets so easy to lead the witness, to say, here's my startup, here's what I think it's going to do, here's why it's great. And you start leading the witness and you're getting people telling you what you want to hear. And it's really hard to get people who are honest with you and truly get their feedback. And my last one, I guess I hit on this, but think distribution as much or more than product. And this is so key, especially for product-led growth. You have to design your product with distribution in mind. There was a survey where they asked founders, what they would do differently the second time. And I think the answer was they would think about distribution first. Because if you build it, they won't come. And I think anybody who's written a blog and put it out on the internet probably has experienced this. Nobody reads it. So you have to really think about, how do you get your item read or discovered as much as you do what are you building?
Yeah, 100%. And I think equally applicable to creating podcasts as well. So there's definitely, I think also across all the three pieces of advice you've provided, there's a lot of kind of interlinking between them as well. Because if you know your audience well, then the distribution will also naturally surface. And if you have the right distribution, then it's easier to build community as well. Now let's transition into some rapid fire questions. For the final 5 minutes or so, I'll challenge you to state your answer in less than 2 sentences. Are you up for the challenge?
I'm up for the challenge. Let's go.
Awesome. First question, best movie you've ever watched?
The Matrix.
What is your favorite quote?
Live the life. And I like that one because what it says to me is if you're not living the life you imagine, it's not going to happen. Go and do what it is you want to do in the way that you want to do it, and it'll happen. But if you don't, it won't.
I love that. And if you were not in tech, what career would you have pursued?
I've always been interested personally and sort of as a hobby in the ski industry. I've done some marketing for the ski industry. I worked with Aspen in the X Games. Someday maybe I'll get back into that game, but right now I'm enjoying tech.
All right, so last question. What is your wildest bet about the tech industry that will happen in the next 5 to 10 years?
I think buttons are going to start disappearing everywhere. What? What does that mean?
That is very bold.
It is.
Please elaborate.
All right, so think about Photoshop. If you're maybe a designer making logo for this podcast, you go into Photoshop and there's a lasso tool and there's a hand and there's a magnifier and there's a gradient tool. And you use your mouse and your hands to go and push all those buttons to make stuff happen. But I can also, as I mentioned before, tell you that I wrote a children's book with a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old with nothing but our voice, where we spoke to the AI as the input mechanism in natural language. And it produced the results without me having to learn Photoshop. And this book was about Canny, the can opener bear of Lake Tahoe, who opens canned goods with his teeth. That's the book. I told Dolly, hey, I need a picture of a bear in the style of Yogi, perched above Lake Tahoe on a sunny day, and it came back with an image. And I said, that's pretty good, but change the trees and do this and do that. A huge change is going to come to the UI for how we all experience products. And a lot of buttons are going to disappear in that process.
Yeah, I think AI is definitely going to be a major game changer. And we will check back in with you, Sean, in 5 years to see if buttons disappeared or not. But yeah, that is all we have today. So thank you so much again, Sean, for joining us. It was really great getting your insights into Atlassian and also the AI industry, and a lot of great advice for us students. I'm going to set up my Google Alert tonight. And I love that within your venture, you're marrying AI with collaboration. I think that's really promising, and best of luck on that. And thanks again for being with us today.
Awesome. And thanks so much for having me. I think it's awesome to talk to new people coming into their career in tech, both because I learn a ton from how you work and how you collaborate and the tools you use, but also because every leader in every tech company has to have a network of great people that they can hire from. And so don't be shy reaching out to those people. They need to go and build great teams of people and be bold as you start your career.